a full democracy. The economists...
We're going to walk down to the Capitol.
USA! USA!
Will never be democratic so long as it's based on the existing constitution and sticks with the capitalistic.
The U.S. constitutional system establishes a fundamentally undemocratic...
You should take those words down.
Voices are growing inside the country about how undemocratic the US actually is. But why did the country still decide to host a summit on democracy?
The Democracy Summit is a showcase of the Biden administration's widely criticized democracy versus authoritarianism geopolitical strategy to divide countries against one another. And its list of co-hosts is a great example of hypocrisy.
Oh, it's entirely geopolitical. And they have a geopolitical doctrine that the United States has to be number one.
Dividing the world into those that the U.S. deems to be democratic versus those the U.S. deems to be undemocratic really means those countries that are allied with the United States. So it's very hypocritical to act like the U.S. has the authority to decide this part of the world is democratic and we're going to come together, and this part of the world is undemocratic and so we're going to push them aside. That's not the way the world should work.
Let's take a look at the co-hosts of the summit. South Korea, the Netherlands, Zambia, Costa Rica, 4 countries from 4 continents, and each represents the US growing push to counter China in the region.
By inviting the Netherlands to co-host the event, the US wants to rally the country into backing its chip competition with China. The Netherlands was not that happy when the US pressured the country's ASML to stop its shipping its high-tech chip-making machines to China.
South Korea is a key actor here too. Number 1, South Korea is a critical part of US chip alliances against China. Number 2, South Korea is an important pillar for Biden to revive the US pivot to East Asia.
I mean, this conference that they're having at the end of the week is headed off by Samantha Powers, who's the head of USAID in the United States, but she is a major promoter of using human rights as a weapon. Hundreds of thousands of people have suffered because of, quote, Samantha Powers' commitment to, quote, human rights.
The summit actually has nothing at all to do with democracy. It is another way for the US to seek to expand its hegemony. Days before the summit, the US released a report attacking human rights conditions in countries around the world, except one, the US itself. The hypocritical report drew a backlash.
The report is out, and nothing in it stands out, except for the breathtaking hypocrisy of America. India or any of these other countries should be releasing a report on human rights in the US. But they don't. They don't go beyond the odd word of condemnation. So we decided to do the honors.
But the idea that the United States should tell the rest of the world what to do, how to develop their so-called democratic institutions, is not acceptable, because the United States is not really functioning as a democracy today. Not a democracy the way the founding fathers understood it, and not a democracy the way I understand it.
A look beyond the US own border will give us a better understanding how US-style democracy really works.
In the name of promoting US-style democracy, the US has imposed unilateral sanctions and long-arm jurisdictions in Cuba, Syria, and Zimbabwe. In the name of promoting US-style democracy, the US invaded Iraq, a country that posed no threat to the US. Over 1 million Iraqis were killed in the past 2 decades. In the name of promoting US-style democracy, the US tried to change other countries' governments, namely a coup, 72 times during the Cold War.
This idea that the United States, that has invaded other countries like Iraq, now we're seeing 20 years, the devastation there, that has taken so many illegal acts against other governments for so many years, overthrowing democratic governments, interfering in the internal affairs, imposing oppressive sanctions on countries like Cuba, Venezuela, Syria, that create tremendous devastation inside those countries and lead to poverty and destroying people's standard of living. These are very undemocratic moves that the United States is taking.
How U.S. sees the world today usually consists of grand moral declarations that divide the world into black or white, friends or foes, or their so-called democracy versus authoritarianism.
All this evokes inertia of an aging empire. Today, insular elites operate by mouthing rhetoric that distracts domestic audiences from the real issues they face at home. These elites in Washington are unable and unwilling to accept the world out there is changing and fast.